She actually did it. The crazy Karen poured an entire glass of red wine right over my head in the middle of a packed Saturday night restaurant, all because I refused to give her an $80 steak for free. Imagine standing there, drenched and humiliated, cheap wine stinging your eyes, your work apron soaked through, while a 50-year-old woman in a tight black dress and a face full of cracking makeup glares at you like you're the one who's out of line. Have you ever just been trying to do your job, to earn a living, only to have someone treat you like you're less than human simply because their outrageous demands aren't met? That was my night. But this Karen, fueled by an ego bigger than the restaurant itself, had no idea what her little wine-soaked tantrum was about to unleash. She thought she was just shaming a young waitress. What she didn't know was that she wasn't just about to be exposed. She was about to become infamous, her entitled charade spectacularly imploding thanks to a hidden camera and a network of fed-up service workers. This wasn't just a bad tip night. This was the night a serial scammer picked the wrong waitress and the wrong restaurant. My name is Mia. Back then, I was 23 and my life pretty much revolved around two things: my shifts at the Willow Creek Bistro and hoarding every penny I earned to fund my dream of attending a prestigious graphic design course. The Willow Creek wasn't just any job. It was a stepping stone. It's a beautiful spot. Really, think cozy exposed brick, the warm glow of Edison bulbs, the constant, comforting clatter of cutlery and contented chatter. It always had this vibrant, upbeat atmosphere, especially on weekends. I'd been a waitress there for nearly 2 years. As a young woman, I guess you could say I was an optimist. I generally liked people, and I genuinely believed in good customer service. A smile, a bit of patience, usually that was all it took to smooth over any little bumps in a dining experience. Most of our customers were wonderful, celebrating milestones, enjoying date nights, or just unwinding with friends. I prided myself on being efficient, friendly, and able to anticipate what a table might need. That kindness, that attentiveness, usually paid off in good tips, bringing me that tiny bit closer to my design school savings goal. Saturdays were our monster nights, a whirlwind of activity from open to close. The energy was infectious. Our manager, David, was the anchor in that storm. He was impeccably fair, had the patience of a saint most days, and possessed this uncanny ability to defuse tense situations with a calm voice and a diplomatic approach. He always had our backs if we were in the right, which made going to work feel secure, despite the occasional demanding diner. We were a tight-knit team, mostly young people like me, juggling work with studies or other dreams. I usually thrived on the Saturday buzz, the challenge of keeping everything running smoothly. This particular Saturday started like any other. I tied on my freshly laundered apron, a crisp, clean shield against the spills and thrills of food service, meticulously checked my station, restocked my order pads, and mentally prepared for the dinner onslaught. I was just Mia, the waitress, a small cog in the big machine of a busy bistro, hoping for a good night, blissfully unaware that my ordinary shift was about to become a spectacle, starring a woman who would redefine the term entitled. The first sign of trouble, though I didn't fully recognize it as such, walked in around 7:30. Or rather, she made an entrance. Chloe, our sweet high school hostess, looked visibly stressed as she attempted to guide this woman into my section. The woman herself was a caricature. Probably late 40s, maybe early 50s, squeezed into a black dress that was trying way too hard, her makeup applied with a trowel. It was the kind of heavy foundation that you knew would show every crack if her face dared to express genuine joy, though joy didn't seem to be in her emotional vocabulary. Her blonde hair was sculpted into that classic, sharp, asymmetrical, "Can I speak to your manager?" bob. A ridiculously large, logo-emblazoned handbag was clutched to her chest like a life raft in a sea of perceived inferiors, and oversized designer sunglasses were perched on her head, despite the evening hour and the soft ambient lighting of the bistro. "Absolutely not," she declared, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, as Chloe indicated a perfectly lovely two-top by the window. This table is unacceptable. I require something more prominent. Something befitting a discerning patron. Chloe, bless her cotton socks, stammered, "Ma'am, this is a very popular table, and we are quite full tonight." Evidently, the woman sniffed, her gaze sweeping across the lively dining room with a look of profound disapproval, as if the presence of other happy, paying customers was a personal insult. Her eyes, like a hawk spotting prey, landed on a recently vacated foretop in the center of my section. "That one. I'll take that one." She pointed with a long, crimson-tipped manicured nail that looked like it could double as a weapon. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." Chloe tried again, her voice wavering. "That table is larger and typically reserved for parties of 3 or 4. The woman let out an exaggerated, theatrical sigh. "Then unreserve it or split the reservation or whatever it is you people do. It's clear you're not at capacity yet." After some tense back and forth and a quiet, diplomatic intervention from David, who managed to steer her to another prime two-top that had just been meticulously reset, she finally, and with extreme reluctance, settled. I took a deep breath, smoothed my apron, and approached with my well-practiced, warm customer service smile. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the Willow Creek. My name is Mia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I get you started with a beverage, perhaps a glass of wine, or one of our signature cocktails?" She subjected me to a slow, deliberate once-over from my sensible work shoes to the top of my head, her lips pursed in a moue of distaste. "Just water. Bottled. And it had better be chilled, not just cold. And a wine list. Though I doubt you'll have anything truly exceptional." Her tone was laced with condescension, as if she was already deeply disappointed in me, the water, and the entire establishment. I kept my smile fixed. "Certainly, ma'am. 1 chilled bottled water, and the wine list coming right up." Internally, a tiny red flag was waving. It wasn't just her demanding nature, it was the undercurrent of disdain, the preemptive judgment. This wasn't just a picky customer. This felt different. This felt like someone who had walked in looking for a fight. The bottled water was presented, opened at the table, and poured with a flourish she barely acknowledged, other than a suspicious sniff of the glass. She perused the wine list with an air of someone deciphering ancient, flawed hieroglyphics before settling on a moderately priced Merlot, which she then complained was a bit thin after her first sip, despite it being a customer favorite. The complimentary bread basket was next on her hit list. She picked up a warm artisan roll, inspected it from all angles as if it might be harboring state secrets, and then declared it too rustic and likely stale, though it had come from the oven less than an hour ago. She didn't eat it, of course, just pushed it aside disdainfully. Each interaction was a small, draining battle. Finally, she ordered the $80 Wagyu steak, our priciest cut, specifying it needed to be perfectly medium rare, with a warm, truly pink center, not red, and absolutely not gray. If it's even a hint towards medium, I'll send it back. And it must be exceptionally tender. I have very high standards. I repeated the order carefully, emphasizing her points, and assured her our chefs were masters of their craft. When I delivered the steak, cooked exactly as she described, a beautiful piece of meat, expertly seared, with that perfect warm pink center, I held my breath.
"Here you are, ma'am."
"Our Wagyu, medium rare. I hope you find it to your satisfaction." She stared at it for what felt like a full minute, then tentatively poked it with her fork. "It looks a little too charred on the outside," she pronounced, her voice already carrying a note of grievance. My professional smile felt painted on. "That's the searing, ma'am. It locks in the flavor. Would you like to cut into it? I'm sure you'll find the center perfectly pink." She sliced a very small, delicate piece from the thinnest edge.
"No."
This is medium. Definitely medium." I distinctly asked for medium rare. Her voice began to climb in volume, and the couple at the table beside hers exchanged uneasy glances. She had barely tasted it. "I understand completely, ma'am," I said, my training kicking in. "Keep calm, offer solutions. I would be more than happy to take this back to the kitchen and have our chef prepare a brand new one for you, if this one isn't to your liking." She let out another one of her dramatic, put-upon sighs. "Well, I suppose you'll have to. But please, tell your chef to pay attention this time. This is becoming quite an ordeal." So, back to the kitchen the first magnificent steak went. Marco, our head chef, a man whose culinary artistry was renowned, just shook his head, his expression a mixture of annoyance and resignation. He personally cooked the second steak, making absolutely certain it was on the rarer side of medium rare, practically bleeding. I double-checked it with him under the past lights before carrying it out, a silent prayer on my lips. "Your new steak, ma'am," I announced, trying to inject a note of confidence I didn't feel. She made a show of cutting into this one, right in the center. "Good heavens," she exclaimed, loud enough to make several heads turn across the dining room. "This is practically mooing. It's blue. Are you people trying to give me food poisoning? This is an outrage." She shoved the plate away with such force that the cutlery clattered loudly. She had consumed about a third of the first steak before her complaint, and now, after one theatrical cut and a microscopic nibble of the second, she was declaring war. I took a slow, deliberate breath, fighting to keep my composure. "Ma'am, I am truly sorry that we're struggling to meet your expectations for the steak tonight. Perhaps this particular dish isn't the right choice for you. May I offer you something entirely different from our menu? Or perhaps a main course salad?" Naturally, this would be on the house, to compensate for the inconvenience. I was digging deep into my customer service arsenal. "On the house?" she scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "The entire meal should be on the house after this fiasco. I came here expecting a high-quality dining experience, and instead, I've been subjected to culinary incompetence and your clear inability to get a simple order right." She waved a dismissive hand in my direction. "Given the sheer emotional distress this entire catastrophe has caused me, I expect the steak I would have enjoyed, had it been prepared competently, to be fully complimentary. And my wine, and perhaps a dessert, to try and salvage something of this disastrous evening." My patience, already worn thin, snapped. Not outwardly, but inside, something gave way. "Ma'am," I said, my voice still quiet but now edged with a firmness that surprised even me. "I can certainly remove the charge for the steak from your bill, as you clearly do not wish to eat it. And I have offered you an alternative main course, complimentary. However, I cannot simply comp your entire potential meal, including alcohol, based on these claims, especially after 2 attempts to satisfy your order for the steak." "Are you accusing me of something?" Her voice dropped to a dangerously silky tone. "Are you calling your customer a liar?" More eyes were on us now. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a blush of pure frustration and embarrassment. "Not at all, ma'am," I replied, my voice trembling slightly despite my resolve. "I am merely stating our restaurant's policy in such situations. I would be happy to get my manager, David, to discuss this with you further if you wish." That was the protocol. When in doubt, escalate to David. "Oh, you can be certain I will be speaking to your manager," she seethed, her eyes narrowing into malevolent slits. "But before I do that," she slowly, deliberately, reached for her half-full glass of Merlot. For one horrifying, suspended moment, I thought she was just going to take a calming sip, or perhaps dramatically slam it down on the table. I never, ever, in my wildest nightmares, imagined she would aim it at me. But she did. With a shockingly swift and vicious flick of her wrist, she launched the dark red liquid directly at my face. The impact was a cold, sticky explosion. Wine flooded my vision, stung my eyes, and cascaded down my hair, my cheeks, soaking the front of my blouse and my pristine apron. The restaurant, which had been buzzing with conversation, fell into an abrupt, tomb-like silence, punctuated only by a few audible gasps. I stood there, utterly frozen, dripping, the acrid smell of cheap Merlot filling my nostrils, the humiliation washing over me in a sickening wave. My carefully maintained composure crumbled. Tears welled, hot and angry. Through the haze of wine and disbelief, I saw her. She was actually smirking, a look of perverse triumph on her heavily made-up face, the empty wine glass still held aloft like a trophy. "Perhaps that got your attention," she said, her voice cool and cutting.
Now.
"About that manager you were so keen to fetch." Before a single coherent word could fight its way past the shock paralyzing my tongue, David materialized. He must have seen the whole thing unfold from across the floor. His usually unflappable demeanor was gone, replaced by a thunderous expression, his jaw tight with a controlled fury I'd witnessed only once or twice in my 2 years there. "Ma'am, that is completely and utterly unacceptable behavior in this establishment," he stated, his voice low, but each word imbued with an undeniable authority that cut through the lingering silence. He placed a gentle, grounding hand on my trembling arm. "Mia, are you okay? Please, go to the back immediately. Get yourself cleaned up. Sarah, can you please cover Mia's remaining tables?" I could only manage a numb nod, vision still blurry from the wine and unshed tears. I practically stumbled towards the kitchen, the sound of Karen's voice, now raised in a shrill tirade against David, echoing behind me. She was impertinent. She ruined my dinner. I've never been subjected to such appalling service in my life. Her accusations followed me like a toxic cloud. The staff break room felt like a sanctuary. Jenna, another waitress and a good friend, rushed towards me, her eyes wide with disbelief, a clean towel already in her hands. "Mia. Oh my God. I saw it happen. That woman is certifiably insane," she whispered urgently, helping me blot the wine from my hair and face. My uniform shirt was a write-off, stained a deep, ugly burgundy. I felt a wave of nausea. Out in the dining room, David was attempting to manage the fallout. He had deftly guided Karen to a more secluded spot near the bar, trying to contain her escalating rant and shield the other diners. It was during this exchange, as Karen was dramatically recounting her ordeal, that Maria, our most experienced waitress, a woman in her early 60s with a photographic memory for faces and a no-nonsense attitude, quietly approached David. Maria, as I learned later, had felt a prickle of recognition looking at Karen. It wasn't a personal acquaintance, but the woman's face, her specific brand of aggressive, theatrical entitlement, had triggered a memory. Maria was an active member of a private citywide Facebook group for restaurant and service industry workers. It was a digital water cooler, a place to share horror stories, vent, and, crucially, warn each other about serial scammers, dine-in dash artists, and customers who made a sport out of belligerence. And this woman, our wine-throwing antagonist, apparently had a recurring role in their unfortunate chronicles. "David," Maria murmured, choosing a moment when Karen was paused for breath, likely to admire her own reflection in the mirrored bar back. "A word, if you please. I think you need to be aware. I'm almost 99% certain that this is the woman they call Steakhouse Susan, or sometimes the Merlot Mauler in the service industry war stories group. Her MO is always the same. Orders the most expensive things, complains about everything, creates an enormous public disturbance, and then demands everything for free. There have even been posts about her finding things in her food or staging minor accidents to get sympathy and a comped bill." David's eyes, already hard, narrowed further. He gave Maria a curt nod of thanks and then turned his attention back to Karen, his strategy visibly shifting. He informed her, in a tone that was polite yet brooked no argument, that he would need to thoroughly review the situation. This would include, he stated, examining the security camera footage covering her table, as was standard procedure for any complaint of this severity, particularly one that had escalated to a physical assault on a member of his staff. Karen actually seemed to puff up slightly at the mention of assault, as if it somehow validated her grievance, but a flicker of unease crossed her face at the mention of cameras. David excused himself and went to his small office, just off the main kitchen. He pulled up the CCTV recordings, and there it was, undeniable and damning. Karen at her table, the first steak arriving, her cutting into it, taking several distinct, unhurried bites, appearing to chew and swallow normally, before signaling me over with a look of displeasure. Then, the arrival of the second steak. Again, a clear bite taken, savored even, before the dramatic recoil and the declaration of it being raw. And then, the wine. The footage was crystal clear, no accidental nudge, no sudden stumble. It was a deliberate, targeted, and malicious act of throwing the wine directly at me. The final nail in her coffin, however, came when David, acting on Maria's tip, did a quick keyword search within that private industry Facebook group. The screen filled with posts. Photos of the same woman, sometimes with slightly varied hairstyles or different power outfits, but unmistakably her, accompanied by a litany of eerily similar stories from at least half a dozen other restaurants across the city and even a few in neighboring counties. The Filet Fiend. Cabernet Karen strikes again. The freebie phantom of fine dining. The aliases were almost darkly humorous, were her actions not so genuinely destructive. This wasn't a customer having a bad day. This was a predator with a well-rehearsed script. David now had a complete, undeniable picture. When he emerged from the office, his expression was no longer one of strained diplomacy. It was one of cold, hard, unyielding resolve. I had managed to sponge off the worst of the wine and change into a spare black blouse that we kept for emergencies in the staff lockers. My hair was still damp and reeked faintly of stale Merlot, and my nerves were utterly frayed. Jenna had made me a cup of sugary tea, and I was huddled on a rickety chair, trying to stop my hands from shaking when David re-entered the break room. "Mia," he said, his voice softer now but with an underlying steel. "Are you feeling up to returning to the floor for a few minutes? You absolutely don't have to, but I have a feeling you might appreciate witnessing this." There was a distinct glint in his eyes, a look that promised not just resolution, but retribution. A surge of something stronger than my lingering humiliation, perhaps a yearning for justice, propelled me to my feet. I nodded. Together, we walked back out into the restaurant. The ambient noise was still lower than usual. An air of tense anticipation hung over the diners. Karen was still ensconced near the bar, radiating impatience and indignation. She'd even managed to bully the flustered junior bartender into giving her another glass of wine. For my nerves, she'd apparently claimed, which she was now sipping with an air of aggrieved royalty. David strode directly towards her, his posture radiating calm authority. I followed a few paces behind, positioning myself near the hostess stand, within clear earshot but out of the direct line of fire. I noticed several of my colleagues, Maria, Jenna, Leo the bartender, subtly positioning themselves to observe the unfolding drama. Even a few curious diners seemed to lean in. "Ma'am," David began, his voice perfectly modulated to be heard by Karen and those nearby, effectively cutting off her attempt to launch into a fresh volley of complaints. "I have now had the opportunity to meticulously review the security footage pertaining to your dining experience with us this evening." Karen scoffed, a sound like air escaping a punctured tire. "And? Did it finally show you just how utterly incompetent your little waitress was? Did you see how inedible those so-called steaks were?" "Actually, no," David replied, his voice smooth as silk but with an edge of iron. "What the footage clearly shows, ma'am, is you consuming a significant portion of your first steak before you declared it overdone. It also clearly shows you taking several bites of the second steak before you proclaimed it raw. And most disturbingly, ma'am, it shows you, with clear intent and without any provocation whatsoever, throwing an entire glass of red wine directly into Mia's face. Karen's jaw literally dropped. The color drained from her face for a split second, then returned with a vengeance, flooding her cheeks with a mottled, furious red that clashed spectacularly with her blonde hair. That's a preposterous fabrication. Your cameras are obviously malfunctioning. Or you've doctored the footage. This is an outrage. Our digital security system is state-of-the-art, ma'am, and is maintained in perfect working order, David stated, his gaze unwavering. Furthermore, it has been brought to my attention by reliable sources that you have a rather well-documented history of engaging in very similar patterns of behavior at numerous other dining establishments across the city and beyond. You seem to be known by several rather descriptive nicknames, in fact. Steakhouse Susan, I believe, is one of them. Or perhaps the Merlot Mauler is more fitting for tonight's performance. At the casual mention of her online monikers, Karen went from furious to ashen. Her eyes darted around wildly, like a trapped animal, suddenly hyper-aware of the silent, watching faces of the other diners and staff. The armor of her smug superiority was not just cracking, it was shattering. I have no earthly idea what you're insinuating. This is slander. Defamation. I am a respected businesswoman. I'll have your jobs for this. A distinct snort of derision came from a nearby table, where an older gentleman who had witnessed the wine incident was shaking his head. Respected? Lady, your behavior was appalling, he called out, his wife nodding vigorously beside him. You will, of course, be paying for the food and beverages you consumed, ma'am, David continued, as if she hadn't spoken. That includes the first steak, of which you ate nearly half according to the time-stamped footage, and the 2 glasses of Merlot you ordered and were served, including the one you chose to weaponize against my employee. As a gesture of goodwill, which frankly you have not earned, we will not charge you for the second, barely touched steak. He calmly slid a newly itemized bill onto the polished surface of the bar in front of her. Karen stared at the slip of paper as if it were a declaration of war. I am not paying this exorbitant bill. This is nothing short of highway robbery. I am the injured party here, she shrieked, her voice escalating into a shrill whine that grated on everyone's nerves. She pushed herself to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You cannot treat paying customers this way. I'll sue this pathetic excuse for a restaurant into oblivion. I'll write reviews that will ensure no one ever steps foot in here again. Ma'am, David said, his patience clearly and finally exhausted, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. You now have precisely 2 options. Option 1. You settle your bill in full, and then you leave this restaurant immediately and quietly. Option 2. I contact the police, and they will escort you from the premises, at which point we will pursue charges for theft of services and assault. The choice is entirely yours. For a long, tense moment, Karen just stood there, sputtering incoherently, her face a mask of contorted rage and disbelief. I could practically see the gears grinding in her head as her inflated sense of entitlement collided head-on with the immovable object of David's resolve and the undeniable evidence against her. The entire restaurant seemed to be holding its breath. I noticed more than one phone discreetly pointed in her direction. Then, with a defiant toss of her head, she made her disastrous choice. You wouldn't dare, she spat, her voice dripping venom. Actually, ma'am, David replied, his own phone already in his hand, his thumb hovering over the call button. I would. And, in fact, I am. He calmly pressed the button. Yes, good evening. I'm calling from the Willow Creek Bistro on Main Street. I require immediate police assistance. We have a customer on site who is aggressively refusing to pay her bill and who has also physically assaulted a member of my staff. Karen's eyes bulged. A strangled sound escaped her throat. You will regret this, she hissed, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and, finally, a flicker of genuine fear. But the bluster seemed to visibly deflate from her as David calmly and clearly provided the dispatcher with their location and a brief summary of the situation. She sank back heavily onto the bar stool, no longer looking imperious, but rather small, cornered, and pathetically defiant, her face still a thundercloud of impotent rage. The ensuing 10 minutes, while we awaited the arrival of the police, were perhaps the most awkwardly silent and tense moments the Willow Creek Bistro had ever experienced. Karen alternated between furious glares at David, venomous looks towards me, and scanning the room for any sign of sympathy, of which there was none. When two uniformed police officers finally walked through the door, a collective, almost inaudible sigh of relief rippled through the restaurant. David, ever the professional, explained the situation calmly and factually to the officers, indicating the security cameras and identifying me as the staff member who had been assaulted. Karen, predictably, erupted into a dramatic, tear-filled, though utterly unconvincing, monologue about her victimhood, the poisonous food, my unbearable rudeness, and the general injustice of it all. The officers listened with expressions of stoic patience before one of them addressed her directly. "Ma'am, are you going to pay the bill for the food and drinks you consumed?" "Absolutely not," she declared, thumping the bar for emphasis. "It's a matter of principle. I've been wronged." "Very well," the officer stated, his tone flat and unimpressed. "In that case, you can either settle your outstanding bill right now, or you'll need to come with us to the station to discuss this further." He then turned his gaze to me. "Miss, regarding the assault with the wine, do you wish to press charges?" I looked directly at Karen, at her face, now a bizarre tapestry of indignant fury and dawning panic. I remembered the sting of the wine, the cold humiliation, the sheer, unadulterated disrespect. "Yes, officer," I said, my voice surprisingly clear and steady. "Yes, I absolutely do." Karen let out a sound that was half shriek, half gasp. The officers calmly informed her she was being detained. As they firmly but professionally escorted her out of the Willow Creek Bistro, past a gauntlet of astonished and disapproving onlookers, her expensive handbag clutched like a shield, her tight black dress now looking somewhat disheveled and cheap, she threw one last, impotent glare in my direction. It bounced off me. All I felt was an overwhelming, cleansing wave of relief and vindication. The instant the main door of the Willow Creek clicked shut behind Karen and the two police officers, the oppressive tension in the restaurant evaporated. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. Spontaneously, applause broke out from several tables. Diners who had been silent witnesses to the entire drama were now shaking their heads, some chuckling in disbelief, others openly expressing their support as I navigated my way back towards the staff area, still feeling a bit shell-shocked but undeniably lighter. That was handled with textbook precision, David. A regular patron boomed from his corner table, raising his glass. Another diner, a kind-looking older woman, discreetly slipped a $50 bill into my hand as I passed. "For your courage, dear," she whispered. "No one should have to endure that kind of abuse just for doing their job." I was genuinely touched, my eyes welling up for a different reason now: gratitude. David placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Mia, you showed incredible poise and professionalism under extreme duress. I am profoundly sorry you were subjected to that. Please, take the rest of an evening off. With full pay, naturally. Go home, have a long shower, and try to forget this ever happened. We'll manage everything here." My voice was thick with emotion as I thanked him. The adrenaline was ebbing, leaving me feeling exhausted but also strangely exhilarated. Back in the sanctuary of the staff room, my colleagues were abuzz. Jenna enveloped me in a fierce hug. "You are incredible." And David, seriously, Manager of the Year award, right there. Maria gave me a knowing wink. We found out over the next few days that Karen, whose real name turned out to be something far less memorable, was indeed formally charged with assault and attempting to defraud an innkeeper, which is apparently the old-timey term for theft of services. Her meticulously crafted evening of entitled drama had imploded in the most public and embarrassing way possible. Not only did she have to eventually pay the full bill at the police station to avoid further charges, but she also now faced legal fees, a potential criminal record, and a reputation that was, thanks to Maria's service industry network and a few anonymously posted but heavily corroborated online accounts of the incident, now permanently tarnished. Steakhouse Susan and the Merlot Mauler were officially local legends, and not in a good way. She wouldn't be trying her entitled tricks in our city, or likely any neighboring ones, for a very long time without someone recognizing her. Walking home that night, the cool night air felt wonderfully fresh against my skin. The faint, lingering scent of stale wine in my hair didn't bother me in the slightest. I felt a profound, almost giddy sense of justice served. It wasn't just about a comp steak or a customer being rude. It was about the fact that for once, blatant, aggressive entitlement didn't win. It was about standing firm, about being supported, and about seeing a manipulative person face real, tangible consequences for their appalling behavior. That night taught me that even in a job where the customer is supposedly always right, there are lines. And when those lines are crossed with such malicious intent, it's okay to push back, and sometimes the world, or at least a restaurant full of decent people, a great manager, and a well-placed security camera, will have your back. The memory of Karen's face, that delightful cocktail of disbelief and dawning horror as the police officers led her away, was a far sweeter reward than any tip. I went to bed that night utterly spent, but with a genuine, satisfied smile. My graphic design fund was a little healthier, but more importantly, so was my faith in a little thing called karma.